I am not in control of the universe. And that's actually very good news for the universe. And it's very good news for me. And you are not either. Now, abstractly, of course, we all know this. But the reality is, at some real deep level, very often we think we are in control of what we are not. And it is in pain and suffering and loss that we discover that. Pain is what you experience, Dallas Willard used to say, when you run into reality. And we run into reality in the fellowship of the withered hand, where we realize our inadequacies. We stop trying to hide them. And then there's the opportunity, if I can let go of that illusion, to discover a deeper truth, and that there is someone good running the universe. But first, you and I may well have to go through utter and painful disorientation. And we see that now in the story of Job. In the first chapter, when we meet Job, we're told that his sons used to hold feasts and their sisters would be with them. And afterwards, Job would make arrangements for them to be purified. Early in the morning, he would sacrifice a burnt offering for each of them, thinking maybe my children have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. And this was his regular custom, so he's going to take care of them. And Job seems to think that by this practice of piety on his part, he can make sure that no matter what his kids do, and no matter how petty God might be, Job is going to manage and control his world and make sure that his family is okay. And of course, then, for reasons that Job doesn't know about, enormous suffering comes onto his life, and he loses his wealth, he loses his servants, he loses his possessions, he loses his children. He loses his health, and he doesn't understand where God is in all this. He is utterly disoriented because he knows he hasn't done anything to bring this on. Now, he has friends that come to be with him. They are sometimes called Job's comforters. Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, Zophar the Naamathite, Dadgum the Termite. And they have a really interesting conversation throughout most of the book of Job. And a couple of scholars, Tremper Longman and John Walton, say that there are three beliefs that create tension in Job's journey between him and his friends as he's learning that he's not in control. And those three beliefs are God's justice, that God is good, that God is fair. And then another one is what might be called the reward principle, sometimes called the reciprocity principle. This is very common in the ancient world, very common in our day too. And the idea is, if your life is blessed, if it's good, it's because you're a good person and good things come to you. And if your life is bad, if you're suffering, you've done something to deserve it. You have messed up and it's your fault. So it's a way of tending to blame the victim and extol, adore the wealthy and the powerful. And then the third belief is Job's integrity. Job believes not that he's perfect when you read through his comments, but that the idea that when he was blessed, he must have been good, and now that he's suffering deeply, he must have done some terrible thing to bring it on himself. He knows that not to be true. And that's the great conflict between Job and his friends. They believe that he must not have integrity. He must have done something wrong because God is just, and we live in a world where if you do good, it'll be rewarded. So chapter after chapter after chapter, they talk about God and try to get Job to admit that he's done something wrong. It's a classic early illustration of what has come to be called mansplaining, only they're doing it to another man. Mansplaining is when you give somebody unwanted, unsolicited, condescending, patronizing, and quite often inaccurate explanations for stuff. Here's what's very interesting. When they first come to him for 7 days, they say nothing. They just sit with him. In Jewish practice to our day, sitting Shiva with somebody comes from this story. If there's somebody who's suffering and you don't know what to say, here's a good idea. Don't say anything. Paul actually says, mourn with those who mourn, and their silence is brilliant. But then when they start talking, things are going to get a bit dicey. Now, here's what's fascinating. And if you ever wonder, is it okay to be honest with God? Can I be real about my doubts? And particularly when suffering comes and I feel disoriented and I don't understand it. Job is unbelievable. I want to read for you one of the most striking verses, I think, in the whole book of Job. What happens when his friends come is Job just pours out bitterness in his heart to God. He says, God has shot poison arrows at me. God has shattered my life. God has pierced my kidney. God has denied me justice. God will not answer my prayer. God has attacked me. You read through these speeches in the book of Job, and the stuff that he says about God is just loaded. And basically, I don't care how powerful God is. This is not good. I have not brought this on myself. And if he says that I brought this on myself, that's not okay. Now, his comforters, on the other hand, say, Job, you can't say that. Job, don't do that. God is God. God can do whatever he wants. And they say all kinds of things of God, like he performs wonders and he injures, but he also binds up. He's righteous. So Job, seek God, they say. Plead with God. Be at peace with God. Your suffering is your fault, Job. And if you'll just fess up, then it will all be okay. You got to let God be God in this. Now, here's what's so striking. After 40 chapters of that stuff, God comes and has a conversation with Job. After the Lord had said these things to Job, he said to Eliphaz the Temanite, I am angry with you and your two friends because you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. Are you kidding? Job attacks God. He complains about God. He laments about God. He accuses God. The comforters defend God, and God shows up and says, Job has spoken the truth, and you have not. So now take 7 bulls and rams, go to my servant Job, sacrifice a burnt offering for yourselves. My servant Job will pray for you, and I will accept his prayer and not deal with you according to your folly. And then again, in case you missed it, you have not spoken the truth about me as my servant Job has. And so they go and do what the Lord told them. That must have been a very interesting prayer meeting, don't you think? After they had ticked Job off so much. Now, what's going on is terribly, terribly important. And I want to read here from Elanor Stump's book, Wandering in Darkness, and what she has to say about Job and his understanding and his relationship with God. In a paradoxical way, Job's passionate accusations against God move Job closer to God. How honest can you be with God? In denouncing the comforter's willingness to kowtow to God, Job takes his stand with the goodness of God rather than with the office of God as ruler of the universe. Without losing his personal commitment to God, to the person of God, Job will say things like, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job refuses to accept what God does just because it is God who does it. If in some way divine power and divine goodness were to be opposed, then in the way in which Job reacts to his suffering, Job is choosing to be on the side of goodness rather than on the side of power. Even if the side of power should be God's side, in this choice, Job is as fervently on God's side as Job can be. There is in philosophy something called the Euthyphro dilemma, and it's from a dialogue that Plato's wrote where Socrates asks, do the gods will what is good because it's good, or is it good just because they will it? And basically Job's friends, Elanor is saying, well, whatever God does, God's got all the power. And so it's okay. And if you're suffering, it's your fault because you brought it on yourself. And Job says, no, for God to be a God that I can love, he must be a God who does what is good. He must be a God who does what is right. And all the power in the world cannot get me to disagree with that. I will not let go of my integrity. And when God comes to Job, what God shows to Job in their conversation is God is good. And God's project is good. Although Job can't see it all, in a very personal way, God unfolds to Job from the beginning of creation God's heart and love and care for everything that he's made, including Job. And in a very personal way, that a God who cares and creates like that will one day redeem, will one day bring good even out of suffering, even out of Job's suffering. But then he goes to his friends and says, no, you guys actually got it wrong. Job is the one that got it right. My goodness is terribly important, and I am good. And so you go to him. And remember at the beginning of the story, Job's offering sacrifices for his children, but in kind of a ritualistic, mechanical way, trying to ward off problems. Now he has come to know God. And over in this little passage, God calls him my servant, Job. Now, he has not yet been restored. That's going to happen, but it hasn't yet. In his weakness, in his brokenness, in his grief, in his loss, in his anger, he is God's servant. And they bow down to pray. And I imagine there's probably some tears and some laughter, and they tick Job off so much, but now he's going to intercede with God on their behalf. And that little branch of the fellowship of the withered hand, Job and his mansplaining friends are restored to God and to one another. Lots more to unpack in Job's story, but I'll just stop there right now. Is there any place you need to be honest with God today? Anything that you don't understand? Again, for Job, part of what he would have to come to grips with is that this little belief right here, that in this world, everything that happens is fair, and if you're suffering, it's your fault, and if you just think positively or do the right thing, then everything will turn out the way that you want to be. Nope. This world is not that kind of a place. It's deeper, it's darker. We don't understand it, but you'll have to let go of that. But then you can come to understand the God who made this world is good beyond your imagining. So maybe today is a time for you to get real honest with God. Maybe it's a time for you to pray for someone who's been ticking you off and mansplaining to you, saying things you don't like. To remember that we serve a good God, and you can be a servant today, no matter how tattered your life feels. Stretch out your hand.
Hey, I'm Tim, and I'm a part of the team here at Become New. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes from John. We also have hundreds more videos just like this one at our website, becomenew.com. You can sign up there for the email that goes along with each video, or to receive a text alert whenever a new video is released. John's coming out with a new book this February titled Steps that was based on a series we did called Ashes to Beauty. Some of you may remember it, and you can find it in our archives. But we wanted you to know that you could pre-order that book right now on Amazon, or find out more information about it at becomenew.com/steps. So be sure to check that out. If you have a prayer request, we're here for you. You can text it to us at 855-888-0444 or email it to us at connect@becomenew.com. Thanks for joining us. Catch you next time.